Thank you, Elizabeth. My name is Catherine Nevins, and along with my family, we are the proud owners of the 100% solar independent bookstore, Main Street Bookends. It is an honor to welcome Bernie Sanders back to Warner. What an incredible year this has been, a year that has forever changed the trajectory of our personal and political history. There is one man that we need to thank for this year. As he crisscrossed the country, we rode this emotional roller coaster along with him. As he showed us Herculean endurance and personal strength, remained the diplomat articulating the tough issues, and never wavered from the message of unity and our collective need to be heard. So I am here today to thank you, Bernie. Thank you for returning to Warner to meet with us after speaking to crowds of up to 28,000 people all across this country. Thank you for having the courage to take on the billionaires and the multinational corporations that want to buy our government for their personal greed. Through your experience as mayor of Burlington and then congressman and senator from Vermont, you have been able to educate us to how horribly rigged this current system is, keeping most of us poor and struggling to meet the basic needs for our families. Few of us believed that in this primary year, you would end up with over 13 million votes and 45% of the delegates, and that you would get this close to the presidency. The odds were always against you, but you did it. Thank you for always speaking common sense and reminding us that as a nation we have so much more that we can agree upon than disagree, that we must have a say on the many issues that directly impact our lives. Not everyone agrees with you, Bernie, but all of us, whether we are Republican or Democrat or Independent or Green, totally respect you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for putting the major issues of our time on the table for all of us to debate and discuss. Health care for all, higher education for all, decent working wages, taking big money out of controlling our government, the freedom to marry the person of our choice, for declaring that the destruction of our environment is the biggest immediate threat we must address. Thank you for always remaining ethical and honorable, stating your concerns and your solutions with clarity. Thank you for reaching out and embracing the peace of Pope Francis and the outrage of Black Lives Matter. Reminding us that we are all the same because we were all raised on the very simple ethic to love and care for our neighbors. Thank you for making it clear that this was never about you, but this is about empowering all of us to stand up, to be heard, and to fight for the changes we want to see. Politicians will only legislate change in response to our demands. Your constant reminder to us to daily live the change we want to see right where we live. Thank you for standing with and listening to a spouse that is equal to you in intelligence, integrity, commitment, and compassion. Thank you for inspiring millions of young people, for showing by example how to get involved, to work for positive change. Thank you for bringing the rest of us back to the possibility of politics for the common good. You have opened the doors for the next generation to emerge and pick up our baton. Thank you for waking us up. After years of despair that nothing will ever change, and for giving us the hope that good will prevail if we learn to work together. We will not go back to sleep. In one short year, you have changed us. You have changed the state of politics forever in this country. I do not know where we are headed, but I remain full of hope, knowing that we can make a difference right here, where we live, with the causes that matter the most to us. We are all here today to thank you, Bernie. New Hampshire remains with you. With immense gratitude and absolute awe, please help me welcome back to Warner, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. Let me begin by thanking Elizabeth and Catherine for those beautiful introductions. In fact, guys, you didn't leave me much to say. You said it all. And thanks, Elizabeth. And I remember being here. It was a day even hotter than today was a couple of years ago. And I remember being in Elizabeth's house for a house party, one of the first events we did in New Hampshire. We had people hanging out the windows, as I recall. So we saw that as a good omen, and it was. And I want to thank the people of New Hampshire and all of you for the support you gave me, not from an ego point of view, although of course as a United States Senator, by definition I have a big ego. That's part of the job. But more importantly, without the very good victory that we won here in New Hampshire, we would not have had the energy and the momentum to carry us through 50 states and continue to raise the issue. So thank you, New Hampshire. I want to pick up, if I might, on the points that both Elizabeth and Catherine made. And the most important point, and I'm very grateful for all the nice things you've said about me, but at the end of the day, it's not me that matters. It is about bringing millions of people together to stand up and fight for economic, social, racial, and environmental justice. That's what it's about. And that is what you are doing right now, and that's what rights and democracy is about. When I talk throughout the campaign about the need for a political revolution, the need to bring millions of people together, this is exactly what I am talking about, what rights and democracy is doing. And let me also be clear, this is not easy stuff. And politics does not mean that you're going to win every victory tomorrow. And I personally get tired of people saying, you know, I'm burned out, I tried, and I didn't change the world yesterday. Went to a demonstration, didn't change the world. I'm giving up. And I want to take you very briefly back to something that I know everybody here knows. And that is real change never comes easily by definition. If the change is real, it means real struggle. And I know you all know that, but just take a brief journey through American history. Remember the struggles of working people. Remember, not so many years ago, children of 12 or 13 were losing their hands in factories or were working in farms rather than being in schools. Remember that workers had to fight and die to form trade unions so they can get decent wages and decent working conditions. That was a struggle involving millions of people, which helped create the American middle class. All of you know the struggles of the civil rights movement going way, way back, way earlier than Martin Luther King Jr. and the modern civil rights movement, of people who stood up and were killed and were lynched and were beaten and were jailed for demanding that in this country we have racial justice and that we end racism. Think about that struggle that went on and is still going on today. Think about the women's movement, and the children don't know this. 100 years ago today in America, women did not have the right to vote, did not have the right to get the jobs or the education they wanted. 100 years ago, no time at all. But women stood up by the millions with their male allies and said that in America, women will not be second-class citizens. Now, I am old enough, and thank you for reminding me how old I am, but I'm old enough to remember that most gay people did not acknowledge 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that in fact they were gay. And that radical transformation of society, where people stood up and said, you know what, we have a right to live our lives the way we want. We have a right to marry whomever we want, regardless of gender. If anyone here thinks that took place overnight, you don't know anything about history. You don't know the kinds of struggles that the gay community went through, the humiliations and the beatings, in order to finally get a conservative Supreme Court to rule that people in this country have a right to marry whoever they want to marry. If we were here, and this is how change comes about. And that's the point Elizabeth made, Catherine made, that I made. It's not from somebody on top. It is from people down below. I'll give you one concrete example. We are living it this moment. If I were before you 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and I said, you know, fellow New Hampshireites, I think we got to raise the national minimum wage to $15 an hour. If I had said that 5 years ago, be people here say, well, Bernie, you know, it's a good idea. I mean, you're really dreaming, man. It's $7.25 now, and you want to more than double the minimum wage. That's crazy. It's too radical. It can't happen. Well, guess what? All over this country now, states and cities are passing $15 an hour minimum wage legislation. And a recent poll just came out a few weeks ago, majority of Americans now believe the minimum wage should go up to $15 an hour. How did that happen in such a quick time? I will tell you exactly how it happened because I was there. You had low-wage workers in the fast food industry, organized by the SEIU, going out on strike and demonstrating and telling their fellow community members, we can't make it on $7.25 an hour. I will never forget, I was in Detroit, Michigan a couple of years ago, talking to fast food workers, mostly black. And they were telling me they were working for $7.25 an hour. They could not even get 40 hours a week at McDonald's. They got 20 hours a week, because obviously if you hire somebody for 20 hours, you don't have to give them any benefits at all. So they would have to get on a bus, because they couldn't afford a car, go to another McDonald's, go to another McDonald's, in order to cobble together a minimum income on $7.25 an hour. But people stood up. I was in North Carolina during the campaign. People standing up and fighting for $15 an hour and the right to form a union. That is courage, and that is how we transform America. So the lesson, which is irrefutable, is that the only way change has ever taken place and ever will take place is when millions of people essentially look around them at the world in which they are living, and the world that they're trying to raise their kids and saying, you know what? The status quo is not working. It has got to change. And that is where we are right now. We are at, in my view, a very, very pivotal moment in history. And as Elizabeth mentioned, one of the extraordinary things that I will never forget about the campaign is that people all over this country, we didn't organize it, trust me, we didn't. People spontaneously were doing all kinds of crazy and beautiful things. There is incredible intelligence and decency and energy in every state in this country. One of the joys of this campaign is that I was able to go around the country and meet so many beautiful, beautiful people who every day are doing extraordinary things. And our job is to tap that energy, to bring that creativity, to bring that intelligence together, so that we transform this country in a very fundamental way and make America the nation that we know we can become. Now, what does that mean in concrete terms? Let me just give you a list of some of the areas that I worry very, very much about as a United States Senator. Issue number one, and we're living it just at this very moment. As a result of Citizens United, which will go down in history along as one of the very worst decisions of the United States Supreme Court, at this moment, the Koch brothers and a handful of other billionaires are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to purchase the United States Congress. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. In fact, it is quite possible that the Koch brothers and a few other billionaires will end up spending more money on this campaign than either the Democratic or the Republican parties. A handful of people who are multi-billionaires, who have said that being a multi-billionaire is not good enough. They now want to own the United States government. So at the top of my list of things that have to be addressed is we need to overturn Citizens United. And we need to, in fact, go further than that and move to public funding of elections. What I want to see is a nation which is a vibrant democracy. That means we have one of the highest voting turnout rates in the world, not one of the lowest. It means where political consciousness is high. People can disagree with each other. That's called democracy. We don't have all of the answers. But people have got to know in God's name what in fact is going on so that we can have a sensible and good debate. So we need public funding of elections, and we need to understand that if we don't get our act together in the near future, this country will drift toward an oligarchic form of society where a handful of billionaires will control the economic and political life of the nation. And that is what we have got to prevent. We also have got to understand that while a handful of billionaires are increasingly controlling the political process, they also control our economy. And what we are seeing, I want you all to think about this for a second. How does it happen that at a time when technology is exploding, when worker productivity is substantially increasing, so the average worker is producing more and more, why is it that for 40 years the middle class of this country continues to shrink so that in New Hampshire and in Vermont, we got people working 2 or 3 jobs. We got people working 50, 60, 70 hours a week to bring in enough money to take care of the family. And how does it happen that the vast majority of all new income being created is going to the top 1%? How does it happen that the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%? How does it happen that since the year 2000, we have seen an increase in billionaires in this country by 10-fold? Used to be 51 billionaires, there are now over 500 billionaires at the same time as we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. What this requires is not just slogans. What this requires is a well-organized political movement around a strong progressive agenda which tells the billionaire class they are not going to continue to have it all. And for a start, what it means, and we got to shout this out from the rooftops, that at a time of massive wealth and income inequality, yes, the wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations will start paying their fair share of taxes. And in order to improve lives for ordinary people, we're going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. We are not going to accept that women in America today make 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. Pay equity for women workers. You know, one of my goals during the campaign was to suggest to the American people that the ideas that we were talking about are not radical ideas. That in many respects they already exist in countries throughout the world. Let me give you an example. I mean, it is an incredible outrage. It's beyond belief. Today in New Hampshire and in Vermont and throughout this country, there are women today who are giving birth to beautiful babies, but they have got to get back to work in 2 or 3 weeks because they don't have the income to stay home and take care of those babies. That is disgraceful. We are the only major country on earth, and in fact most poor countries, have guaranteed paid family and medical leave. We don't. That has got to change. There are a lot of angry people in this country, and they have a reason to be angry. They're angry because they're worried about their economic future, and they are worried about their children. Parents worry more about their kids than they do about themselves. And all over this country, people, middle-aged people are saying, what's going to happen to my kid? Will my son or daughter ever get a decent paying job commensurate with his or her education? Will my kid ever be able to own a home of his or her own? Will my child ever be able to pay off the outrageous student debt that is destroying their lives? That is what parents worry about. And what they know and what all of us know is that while we are much better off today economically, make no mistake about it, than we were before Obama came to office, when we were losing 800,000 jobs a month, understand that real unemployment, including those people who have given up looking for work, and the millions who are working part-time when they want to work full-time, real unemployment is double what official unemployment is. And that means that we have got to create millions of decent paying jobs in this country and put the unemployed and underemployed back to work. Now I know that infrastructure roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants are not exactly sexy issues. Probably no organization here of Infrastructure United. But it is an enormously important issue. We used to have the best infrastructure in the world. Number one, water systems, wastewater plants, roads, bridges, rail, airports. We are way, way down behind other countries. $1 trillion investment can create 13 million decent paying jobs, making this country more efficient, more productive, and safer. And that is exactly what we have to do. When we try to ask ourselves why it is that the middle class is declining, why 47 million Americans live in poverty and the gap between the rich and the poor is growing wider, one of the key reasons is our disastrous trade policies. NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China. What these trade policies, written without exception by corporate America, the drug companies, and Wall Street, what they have resulted in is the shutdown of tens of thousands of factories in America and the loss of millions of good-paying jobs. We need a trade policy that represents working people in this country, poor people around the world, not just the CEOs of large multinational corporations. And when I get back to Washington, literally tomorrow, the issue on the table, the most important issue, will be the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I hope you will join me in doing everything we can to defeat this disastrous trade agreement. What the TPP incorporates is literally the globalization of the corporate world. One area that I just want to spend a moment on, some of you know it, some of you don't, is that incorporated into the TPP and other trade agreements is a provision called Investor-State Dispute System. Some of you familiar with that? And this is what it says, and it's important to raise it, bring it out, because it is so outrageous, people can't even believe it. What it says is that a foreign corporation, if they feel their future profits have been impacted by a governmental decision, local, state, federal, whether it's health care or protecting the environment, they have a right to sue in a 3-member corporate tribunal. Let me give you some examples. If you can believe, this is how crazy it is. Little country of Uruguay, tiny little country, did the right thing. And they put notices on their cigarette packages trying to get kids not to smoke. They were sued by Philip Morris because they tried to keep their kids from getting cancer. Fortunately, Philip Morris lost that case. But that should not be something that anyone should be debating. We don't need a tribunal to determine whether Philip Morris's profits are more or less important than the children of Uruguay. President Obama did the right thing. He killed the Keystone Pipeline. And he agreed with many of us about the absurdity of encouraging and accelerating the excavation and transportation of some of the dirtiest fuel on this planet, when we have to, in fact, move in exactly the opposite direction and cut carbon emissions. He understood that. He did the right thing. How many of you know that as a result of Obama's decision, TransCanada, the owner of the Keystone Pipeline, is now suing the United States government for impacting their profits? They want $15 billion because we made the right decision to try to combat climate change. That is how insane. That you can argue You like the Keystone Pipeline, you don't like the Keystone Pipeline, but the idea that we can be sued by a foreign corporation because we impacted their profits is nothing less than insane, and speaks about the corporatization of the entire global economy. That the only thing that's important, it's not children's health, it's not the environment, it is their profits. We need a whole set of new trade policies that protect the environment, protect workers, and tell corporate America and the corporate world that their days of getting it all are long behind us. When we talk about wealth and power, when we talk about arrogance and greed and recklessness in this country, these are just a few words to describe Wall Street. Today on Wall Street, we have 6 financial institutions, 6, that have assets equivalent to 60% of the GDP of the United States, $10 trillion, 6 financial institutions. We bailed out Wall Street because some of the big banks were too big to fail. 3 out of 4 of the largest banks are bigger today than they were when we bailed them out. They're back. Wall Street's greed and recklessness brought this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression of 1929. Now is the time for us to stand up to Wall Street, to pass Glass-Steagall legislation, and more importantly, to break up the large financial institutions. When we talk about the need to transform America, to make sure that our grandchildren look back and they say, you know, Grandma, Grandpa, how did you allow this to happen? I want kids 75, 100 years from now to look back and say, tell me, how did you allow it to happen that in America, 28 million people had no health insurance and even more were underinsured with large deductibles and co-payments? The media doesn't tell you this. But every year we lose thousands of people who die from preventable illnesses simply because they did not have enough money to go to the doctor or the nurse when they should. Every other major country on earth, every major country, has made the decision that health care is a right, not a privilege. And that is precisely what we have to do. Now, this is not going to be easy. It is just like taking on Wall Street, taking on corporate America. The insurance companies and the drug companies are enormously powerful entities, incredible number of lobbyists, an incredible amount of campaign contributions. But at the end of the day, we have got to have a vision which says that in America, every man, woman, and child has a right to health care because they are a human being. And when we do that, by the way, because our dysfunctional system is not only wildly wasteful and bureaucratic, it is far and away the most expensive system in the world. When we do that, we will save the average middle-class family thousands of dollars by moving toward a Medicare for all single-payer program. I don't have to tell anybody here, as I look at the solar panels, that climate change is the great, great global crisis that we face. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change has already caused devastating problems in our countries. You may have read the other day, all over the East Coast now, you're seeing communities being flooded, heat waves in Europe, the expansion of drought. If we do not get a handle on climate change, if we do not transform our energy system, the planet that we leave our kids and our grandchildren will be significantly less habitable than the planet in which we grew up. And we cannot allow that to happen. This is a moral issue. We are the custodians of this planet, and we cannot sit back and allow it to be destroyed. And one of the political disgraces, of which there are many, but maybe the most remarkable, is that as we speak, we have a major political party called the Republican Party that not only does not want to make progress in transforming our energy system, they refuse to even acknowledge what the scientists are saying. Think about it. How do you make public policy if it's not based on science? And for the scientists, the debate is over. Climate change is real, caused by human beings, and we must transform our energy system. So this is an issue. This is an issue of extraordinary impact, not only in America, but throughout the world. We have got to have the guts to take on the fossil fuel industry and to tell them that their short-term profits are not more important than the planet we're leaving our kids and our grandchildren. We have today, I think Elizabeth was making this point, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. We have 2.2 million people, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American, behind bars right now. We're spending $80 billion a year locking people up. Well, you know what I think? And what anybody who has studied this issue thinks? That it is a hell of a lot more sensible to be investing in jobs and education for the young people rather than jails and incarceration. Throughout the campaign, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of Latino activists, people who worry every single day that their mom or their dad or their brother or their sister may be picked up and deported. We got 11 million people in this country today living under the shadows, and many of them, because they have no legal rights, are being exploited as workers. If you're undocumented, I could pay you anything I want. You can't do a damn thing about it because you got no legal rights. And that is why we need to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship for the undocumented. Now, I bored you for the last half hour. No, because what I wanted to do is to make the point that politics is more than what CNN tells you it is. It's not just attacking this candidate or attacking that candidate. No candidate is perfect. What campaigns are about are not Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or anybody else. They are you. They are you. And what as Americans we have got to do is go beyond CNN and the corporate media and say, okay, what are the issues facing the country? And I've described some of them, not all of them. And where do the candidates stand? That's what we have to do. And that is not what media by and large does. There was a study that came out recently that says something like 11% of all TV deals with issues. The rest of it is campaign gossip. And what we have got to do is take a deep breath and say, okay, what are the issues? How do we go forward? I know not everybody agrees with me, but I think that at this particular moment in history, and I speak as the senator from Vermont and as a grandfather of 7 beautiful grandchildren, I think Donald Trump would be a disaster for the future of this country. I am going to do everything that I can to see that he is not elected. And I'm going to do everything I can to see that Hillary Clinton gets elected. I know, I understand. Trust me. Trust me. I understand it. I understand it. All right? You're talking to the longest serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. I know a little bit about third-party politics, and I understand there are people who may not agree with me, and I respect that. But I feel that at this particular moment in history, somebody like a Trump, who is running his campaign not only on reactionary economics, more tax breaks for billionaires, and cutting programs for working people, not just that he does not even accept the science of climate change, let alone will do anything about it. But this is a man who is running his campaign. The cornerstone of his campaign is bigotry, is dividing us up. It's to try to get one group of Americans to hate another group. Maybe it's Muslims, maybe it's Mexicans, Latinos, maybe it's women. Remember, Trump, before he was a candidate, was a leader of the so-called birther movement. You all remember that? Don't forget it. What the birther movement was about was not a disagreement with Obama. It was trying to delegitimize the first black president we have ever had. To say he's not really the president. He wasn't born in America. That is a disgusting, disgusting thing to do. That is where this guy is coming from. And I don't know, honestly don't know, what happens to this country over a period of 4 years if he is elected president. So I, for one, no, not everybody agrees with me, I, for one, am going to do everything that I can to see that he is not elected president. But having said that, let me also repeat the first point I made. And that is, hopefully, the first day that Hillary Clinton is in office, we need millions of people to stand up and to demand that she moves in the direction of the Democratic platform that together we helped to write. Politics does not end and never has on election day. So we have got to be mobilized and organized. And what we have behind us, because of you did it, and people in 49 other states did it. We have now the most progressive platform of the Democratic Party by far in the history of this country. Our job is to make sure the Democratic leadership enforces and implements that agenda. So I want to just conclude by telling you that I am enormously proud of the grassroots activism that I see around here. Yes, the billionaire class has more money than we can ever dream of. Yes, they own the media. Yes, they have enormous impact in Congress. But here is the real truth, that when millions of people stand up and fight back, when we are united and not divided, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Thank you all very much.